It was a short one. We are now into the last full week of campaigning in this federal election. Let's give you a snapshot of where polling sits this morning. Let's take a look at preferred prime minister. Right now, it sits at 44% for the Liberals, 36% for the Conservatives, and 11% for the NDP. With a closer look at those numbers, as we start week 5 of this campaign, is Nik Nanos. He's the founder and chief data scientist at Nanos Research. He's joining us from Ottawa this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
Okay, when we take a look at the Liberals and Conservatives, they are in a dead heat when it comes to middle-aged voters. How much of that could change in this final week?
Well, a lot is going to have to do with what the two front-running campaigns decide to focus on from a policy perspective. You know, the platforms are all out, and I think what we're probably going to see is from the two front-runners a focus on what they think will swing those voters. You know, the thing is Anne-Marie, you know, when we think of middle-aged voters, they are very likely to vote. They're a key demographic. They're highly engaged, and you know, the thing is they'll be critical to deciding, you know, the shape of the next federal government. So, you know, right now, it's going to be interesting to see how both the Carney and Poilievre kind of hone their messages to try to persuade those voters.
Quick question, Nik. You know, there was a lot, the advance polls were open over the weekend. Does advance voting play into any of these numbers at all, or these are all taken from a sample of people who haven't voted yet?
No, this is a sample which is representative of the country, so includes people who have voted in the advance polls. We don't take those folks out because that would actually mess up the numbers probably, because you know, the thing is we've had record number of people voting in the advance polls. You know, the interesting thing, you're talking about the advance polls, Anne-Marie, is that usually a high voter turnout is many times good for the challenger. But we don't know this time because this election is a little different because of the, I'll call it the shadow of Donald Trump, and people trying to sort through who they think might be, they want as prime minister. And the other thing is the consolidation behind the Liberals and the Conservatives to the detriment of all those other parties means that we're in a two-party race. You know, it's clear the Conservatives are motivated because the Conservative vote is motivated by change. The big question is how motivated might the Liberal Party voters be? Because I think it's more about Mark Carney than it is about the Liberal Party or what's happened in the last 10 years.
That seems to be what we are hearing anyway when we speak with people as well. Listen, you mentioned this last week that the debates often may not change people's minds, but sort of solidify what they were feeling in their guts. How did the debates from last week impact this choice for preferred prime minister, if at all?
Well, you know, we still have Mark Carney in the lead on the preferred prime minister tracking. He's down from where he was, especially about a week ago. He's flat over the last 3 days, but compared to before the debates, he's down a little bit. Jagmeet Singh has actually improved his numbers, not just in the last 3 days, but compared to the last week. So maybe that, I'll call it the Scrappy Singh thing, if we can say that, in the French debate and the English debate helped him a little bit, but you know, he's still so far behind. You can see it at 6% nationally on the preferred prime minister tracking that it's really about the two front runners right now. You
mentioned there was a little bit of change with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. So do we typically see polls change much in this final week of the election?
Well, for the polls to change, we need some kind of blockbuster news, you know, or one of the party leaders basically to make some sort of mistake. The thing is that the times where the biggest changes can potentially happen are during debates. You know, in the debates, we know that the leaders are stacked up against each other and they get to attack each other. I think my sense is in this particular debate, generally for the two frontrunners, it reinforced support that they already had. That if you were into Pierre Poilievre, you thought Pierre Poilievre won the debate. If you were into Mark Carney, you probably thought that he did good enough to get through the debate without kind of changing the trend line. So what we have to see is whether the Conservatives, and I think the focus this week could probably be on the Conservatives, because they have to decide and figure out what they need to do to close that gap, you know, to attract middle-class voters, to do a little better in British Columbia. And also, you know, Ontario's the big prize in terms of seats. You know, right now the Conservatives are 10 points back. They really need to close the gap in Ontario if they want to challenge the Liberals and form a government.
Nik, this is going to be my last chance to ask you this before voting day. So I'm curious to know if viewers are watching this morning, and we know in an election this close, where they choose to spend their final days is really where they're trying to hone in their strength and their energy, their strategy and their power. So what should viewers and voters be watching for in this coming week as they're examining the parties if they haven't made up their minds yet?
Well, I think for the two frontrunners, they're going to spend a lot of time in Ontario and British Columbia. For both of those parties, the Mississauga, Bromptons, and Etobicoke Lakeshores, those ridings, suburban ridings, that, just voted for the provincial progressive Conservatives. It's kind of, we're in a bizarro world, Anne-Marie, where, Ford won big, the Conservatives won big. Those very same voters now are more likely to tilt towards the Liberals. So, the thing is there is hope for the Conservatives because a lot of those ridings have just voted Conservative. So look at Ontario. I watch British Columbia, too, for not just the front-running parties, but Jagmeet Singh, half of his caucus is there. So expect him to spend a lot of time there. And, he's in a fight for his political life in his own riding where there's a significant challenge from the Liberals.
I'd also encourage everybody to check out the ctvnews.ca website for your analysis and a great breakdown into demographics, which I always find really fascinating. Founder and Chief Data Scientist at Nanos Research, Nik Nanos, thanks for your time this morning.
Bye-bye.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.